Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the August meeting of the Annapolis Education Commission. I'm Jeff McCrease. I'm the Ward 2 representative to the commission. I'm serving this year as the chair of the Annapolis Education Commission and also the proud parent of 5 public or former public school students. We sent out an agenda electronically earlier, and it was posted to the city's website, and we'll follow that agenda for the remainder of the meeting tonight. I'd like to start off with a roll call. If you would, when I call your name, introduce yourself, which ward you're from, starting with Ward 1 and Brianna Griffin.
Hi, Brianna Griffin, Ward 1 Commissioner.
Okay, and I'm the Ward 2 Commissioner. Ward 3, Enid Collison-Lee. Not yet here. Ward 4, Kayla Golder. Not yet here. Ward 5, Olga Cortez. Not yet here. Ward 6 is unfilled. Ward 7, Laura Booth.
Laura Booth. I have a son at Annapolis High School going into his senior year, and I have a daughter at Monarch.
Great. Thank you, Laura. Ward 8, Jess Packler is not here yet. At large A, Ms. Odessa Ellis.
Yes, I'm here.
Great, thank you very much. At large B is not filled. At large C, Ms. Janet Norman.
Hi, Janet Norman. I have a rising senior at Annapolis High, and I'm Annapolis PTSA president, and Laura Booth is Annapolis High PTSA treasurer.
Great, congratulations for filling those critical roles. It's just an hour a week, remember that. At large D, Mr. Ken Starks.
Hey, Ken Starks, at large D, vested interest in all the youth of Annapolis.
Great, thank you. Alderperson Sheila Finlayson is not yet here. And our secretary, Brianna, according to my calculation, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people here. We do not yet have a quorum, so we'll hold off on the minutes until a later time. Let me see. I see our city council person, Lisa Rodbian. Lisa, you want to introduce yourself, please?
County Council.
County Council, I'm sorry.
I'm Lisa Rodbian, representing District 6, which includes the city of Annapolis and the surrounding areas on the County Council.
Great. Well, thanks very much, and we appreciate your steadfast support of these education issues. And thanks for joining us here today.
Also a public school teacher at Arundel Middle.
Great. God bless you. All right, so we'll hold off on the approval of the minutes until we have more people and we can get a quorum. Next on the agenda is public comment. Actually, it's not on the agenda, but it comes at the beginning of our agenda items. Odessa Ellis, you had put some comments in via the public comment line. The floor is yours.
Okay, Jeff, do you have that comment? Can you read some of it? I was trying to find it.
Okay.
Can you read it for me or?
I can pull it up.
Okay.
Odessa, the bandwidth on this video is taking up a lot of my computer time, so it's slow in loading. How about if we come back to it here and I'll have that before the end of the meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
That's fine.
Item number 1 on the agenda is the Annapolis Food Bank. However, Ms. Kelly Salters from the Maryland Food Bank, who is scheduled to speak, cannot attend due to an illness. Is there anyone here who wanted to speak to her, or should we move to her talking points, or should we move on with the agenda?
I have one question.
Sure.
I don't know if you've gotten any more information, what Bob Mosier sent out about needing the waiver from the state, which apparently from what we found online, looks like the state has gotten the waiver from the federal. Are we now applying to the state to get the waiver? I'm just not quite understanding exactly what that meant, because it looks like they have extended it through the end of the school year. So we should be covered. I'm not sure exactly what it is that Anne Arundel County is still waiting on.
Does anyone have any amplifying information on Laura's point?
What is the question?
The email that that Jeff forwarded from Bob Mosier about the meal distribution from the county said that they had extended it through August or through, I think, was it July 31st or August 31st? But at any rate, it was set to expire then, and we would need to reapply for a new waiver. But from what we found online, it looks like they have extended that, but I don't know if we needed, if what we're waiting on was a decision from the state, or like, do we need to specifically reapply for the waiver? I don't really understand how it works. I just want to make sure that meals, our meal supply is not going to be interrupted at any point for the families that are depending on that.
Yeah, Laura, I don't have any amplifying information. The word that we've heard from some parents is that due to some changes at the federal level in Washington, that there are some federal changes that may impact the manner in which the county school system distributes its federally funded free meals. And it was of high enough concern to these parents that they brought it up. Mr. Mosier forwarded a hyperlink to the last Board of Education meeting, and it was discussed there, but I could not gain specifics from that hyperlink. So we'll attempt to get some more information here over the coming month. My understanding is by the end of August is when some waivers that had been administered to the county were set to expire, but I don't want to put out bad information. I just don't know. Okay, so we'll move on to agenda item number 2, which is Mr. Ted Birkinshaw from the Steering Committee for the Collaborative of Nonprofits Serving Children and Youth in Annapolis and Anne Arundel County. Mr. Birkinshaw, the floor is yours, sir.
Well, thank you, and we appreciate your inviting us to this meeting. I know Aaron Snell more typically is involved, but I'm on the steering committee, and she asked if I would fill in. And just a brief background on me, I've been a member of the Annapolis Maritime Museum board for 8 or 9 years. And what got me interested in getting involved with the Maritime Museum was really the education programs that they were doing, particularly for those most in need. So when I had an opportunity to get involved with this collaborative, I was pretty pumped about it. So, and I think maybe it's some members of this group and others saw that really it made sense for nonprofits to start working together. An example that I noticed, because we sort of absorbed the Box of Rain program, and you look at some of the kids that are going through there and you sort of think, well, some of them need some financial literacy issues. Where do we send people for that? If they've got other concerns, where do we send people for that? So this gives you a sense about our group.
Ted, I'm sorry, your picture was frozen for the last 15 seconds. Can you repeat that last 15 seconds of what you said, please?
Yeah, if I can remember what those are. I said I was on the board, or I am on the board of the Maritime Museum, and it's really the educational piece that got me interested with them. And what I guess you missed was we had some Box of Rain kids who were I felt maybe would benefit from financial literacy, and it's like, who do we send people to for that? So this was a way of trying to get the all the nonprofits that are aligned with youth in Annapolis and Anne Arundel County together, and so this was really started. Maybe the idea for it was Aaron Snell and Vanessa Bright's last summer, and so it's the Collaborative Nonprofits Serving Children working together so youth facing adversity thrive. And I've got to minimize things here. I'm going to back out 1 second, sorry. And so they got the ball rolling, and we probably have about 40 nonprofits that are sort of aligned with this youth initiative. And this was the initial steering committee that we put together, again, with Vanessa and Aaron kind of leading the way with that. We then, the goals really initially were a desire for nonprofit leaders to better get to know one another, to build trust in each other, and learn about each other's organizations and their missions. And then looking ahead, we've agreed to adopt a collective impact approach. And if you may be familiar with that, but here are the 5 conditions for successful collective impact. Is 1, to have a common agenda, 2, have mutually reinforcing activities, have a shared measurement system, have continuous communication, and have a backbone support organization. And I'd say one of the difficulties with the shared measurement system is, we have some groups like STARE that are kind of working horizontally and are attacking the need for reading at the 2nd grade level versus, a group like Charting Careers, which is really more longitudinal. And so kind of integrating these groups, blending them in and seeing what one can do versus the others is a bit of a difficulty. And I would also add that it's not only STARE, but also Let's Go Boys and Girls, which deals with STEM programs, have indicated that they run into an obstacle when they ask for information regarding how well their students are doing, down the line. So we don't know, for instance, if STARE's intervention at 2nd grade is sufficient, and those kids are now, going to be able to be good readers all the way through. We all know that if you can read at the end of 3rd grade, the chances of you finishing high school are pretty good. And if you can't read at the end of 3rd grade, the chances of you not making it through high school are also pretty good. So, we're going to want to have, I think, the support of you guys and the school system in trying to help knock down that barrier for us to be able to measure the impact that we're having, following these students longitudinally that run through STARE, for instance, and seeing how successful they are with their reading down the road, because we don't know. And we need to be able to check our approaches and modify based on, on our outcomes. Our idea tentatively, and all of these items here, we're very early in the process of developing it. In fact, there's a meeting of a small group about shared measurement systems today, or was today. I've got a group meeting about backbone support organization tomorrow, and they're reporting back to the steering committee. But and our vision tentatively for backbone support is really that it be a homegrown group out of the group of collaboratives, and have it be a volunteer initiative initially with a sort of a hands-on board of stakeholders in the community. We think that that's going to work, well, better than what we've seen at Baltimore Promise, for instance, where it seems like the board is not as hands-on maybe as it should. Ensuring all youth facing adversity thrive and successfully progress from cradle to career. I don't know if you've lost me there maybe, but the dots represent our nonprofits, and you can see some of them are overlapping. Some of them are more aligned with that cradle to career pipeline. And what we also have is that we've got voids in that pipeline. And so we need to look at opportunities to fill the void. And it doesn't mean that these nonprofits change their missions, but they may tweak their missions. As well as other nonprofits come along, we can say, hey, this is an area where we would need your impact, so that we can ultimately be, much more, filling the voids and create this a cradle to career, pipeline that will have, a lot of impact. And we are all really pretty committed to do what Jeffrey Canada of Children's Zone has done successfully and do whatever it takes to make it happen. And so, we wanted to, let you know about us. We are also, simultaneously developing our organization, but we're also looking at ways that we can help the sort of the pivot to e-learning, getting to know the people in the subsidized housing areas. We have ideas for creating outdoor living space or outdoor educational spaces, and working and bringing rotating our nonprofits and tutors through these sectors. But we obviously, just like you, don't want to do it in isolation. We need everybody to know what everybody else is doing, and so that's kind of why I'm here talking about this. So we want to know what you're doing, and we want you to know what we're doing.
Well, Ted, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate you bringing to the attention of the Education Commission some of the valuable work that you're doing. We have time for maybe one question or comment here. Anyone have anything to add or to request from Ted, Janet, and Laura?
Ted, I just wanted to tell you, I'd love to follow up with you on the outdoor classroom ideas. I was on the Maryland Partnership for Children in Nature through my agency and worked on some schoolyard habitat programs. So we've got some ideas for low cost, how you conduct outdoor lesson type things. So I'll reach out to you, okay?
Great, thanks.
Laura Booth.
This is great. And it sort of follows, I just had a conversation this afternoon with the principal at Monarch, and we were talking about, and Ken, I was going to tap you too, into talking about how we can support students who may not have support at home. We have a lot of kids that are trying to get online here and may not have parents that are either computer savvy or, may work a lot of hours and just not have the time and the hours to support kids for the hours that they are going to be sitting, hey, Kayla, in front of the computer. So trying to figure out ways, I'm sure there's a lot of overlap from different organizations in our community that want to help in those areas. And I'm excited to hear that there's sort of an agreement between them, so that maybe we can all coordinate efforts and make sure that all of those needs are being met and that kids aren't slipping through the cracks. We don't have a group that's helping one group of kids over here and then another group that's helping a different group of kids over there and then a group in the middle that's not getting any help at all. So this is terrific, and yeah, look forward to hearing more about what you're doing and how we can tap into that with our PTA resources and things. As we get underway with this new and challenging school year.
Great,
Thanks.
appreciate your feedback.
Ted, since this is being recorded here, do you mind sharing your email? So if anyone has any questions, they can contact you directly.
Yeah, it's my last name, Birkinshaw, BERKINSHAW @gmail.com.
Okay, well, thanks again, Ted, and I hope this begins a fruitful relationship between members and followers of the Education Commission and your organization as well. We wish you the best.
Great, thanks so much for the opportunity.
Great, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Next on the agenda is an update on our transportation situation. Ms. Jess Packler is the chair of our transportation subcommittee. She's unable to make it tonight. The transportation issue was front and center this past summer here at the county council level. Laura Booth, you put forward a resolution that was picked up by the county council, and the ball bounced your way here. Do you mind giving us an update on how things went? And
or perhaps we could have Lisa talk about it, since she was instrumental with our support of the county.
Well, we'll yield to Lisa in a moment here, but would you mind giving us an update on what your resolution basically said and then where it went?
Update is Lisa Rocks. And so she was instrumental in getting support from the council in defeating the effort by the Board of Ed to shift money away from the transportation budget. The only follow-up that I've heard, which was not encouraging, was that it's possible that Anne Arundel County Public Schools may not fill those positions. So, and I haven't heard any update, unless if anybody else has. I have not heard any follow-up from the Board of Ed that they are going to actively fill those positions. So the money still remains in the budget for them. Whether or not that will get filled or not, I'm concerned specifically if we try to open in, we are virtual, so there is not a need for transportation per se in the budget for the fall, but in the spring semester, if they do try to go back to some in-person learning in the spring, or even if they do for like special ed or some of the other small groups, we're really going to need a transportation department that has a good handle on how many students are on each bus and making sure that those buses are not overcrowded for the safety of students, especially particularly if we're talking about special ed students who may have other health issues. It is critical that we have safe bus transportation, with the social distancing and things in place that are needed to protect those students. So my concern is, can our current transportation department deliver on those concerns, especially if they don't fund those positions. So I'm throwing it out there to the universe right now. I haven't heard anything one way or the other from the Board of Ed or from anyone in the school system that is going to imbue me with a lot of confidence in that regard. So it is definitely going to have to remain an open issue that we stay on top of as the school year progresses.
Great. Laura, thanks very much. Our county councilman for the Annapolis cluster, Lisa Ravian. Lisa, you played a part in getting that school board decision overturned and restore funding for the transportation positions. Lisa, do you have anything to add about the effort and where that stands at the county level?
Unfortunately, I don't have a whole lot. That was a pretty complete description of where we're at right now. And I really just wanted, this was by far a community effort. There was, I kind of started to put the initial word out, but then once I put the word out, people from all different organizations stepped up and started putting pressure on members of the county council. And I think at this point, perhaps, I was sort of dumbfounded that the Board of, or I guess I shouldn't say, we need to be careful that we're separating the Board of Education from AACPS administration, because I think the Board of Education did indeed, support hiring those positions, but the administration is saying, or has said that they may not. I think that now, especially since we will be in remote learning for the fall semester, there should be significant savings in transportation, that there really should be no need to, hold off on those positions, which, as Ms. Booth just mentioned, will be critical as soon as we get back in any sort of, hybrid situation, making sure students with special needs have their transportation appropriately addressed, and all different kinds of scenarios that we might be in. I mean, there's such a broad range right now of where we could be, that I would be kind of dumbfounded if they didn't take the opportunity now. So perhaps, conversations about how to encourage AACPS administration to take any savings they have and make sure, like you said, Ms. Booth, that the transportation department has, the skill sets that it needs, the personnel that it needs to make things efficient and safe for when students start returning to the buildings. So unfortunately, I don't have any updates. I know there's a board meeting on, I believe there's a board meeting on Wednesday. Is that correct?
No, I don't think so.
It's not in the regular schedule, but I believe I see at least Alderwoman Finlayson nodding, saying yes. Someone else
They're having a special meeting in the evening, I believe,
Okay.
to talk about returning to school.
Okay. And so I don't know if this would even come up, since the context is probably the more immediate return to school. So I don't know if transportation will come up in any significant manner right off the bat, but that's all I've got. And
Will that board meeting be on television?
it should be. It should be. I mean, their meetings are always supposed to be open to the public, and since they, at very least, it should be online. And I don't know, I see Ms. Norman raising her hand, but I think that's the chair's prerogative to call on other folks. I don't know.
Janet?
I was wondering, and like the rest of the members, to consider whether we need to make a motion to AACPS administration to please hire the positions that were funded by the county council. This is a unique opportunity where we might have a large pool of talent of logistical software, routing, transportation people, folks coming out of the University of Maryland, highly rated transportation logistics programs. Now is the time to get the talent when other businesses are kind of on hold. And if they do not act now, they will lose years of functionality. I think we really need to encourage them to follow through with the motion that we made to fund the positions by actually hiring and having workable people in the positions.
Agreed.
I see you just joined us here. Laura and Lisa gave an update on where the transportation issue stands, at least the issue with the transportation positions whose funding had gone out of the budget and then was reinstituted by the county council. Do you have anything to add, Jess, as the transportation subcommittee chair?
Yeah, I'm sorry for late. I had conflicting Zoom meetings. I'm sure Janet and Laura, you talked about how, did you talk about how Dr. Arlotto has now said that he's probably,
Yes.
he's, okay.
Yes,
So I think that's
I
something we have.
proposed a motion.
Oh, okay, great. Because I really think that's something we really have to continue. You know, these transportation positions are really important, especially for our cluster. One thing I don't know if I had asked Janet when I found out at the last minute that I was going to be late. I don't know if you got a chance to, but I have put together a survey that I'm just tweaking that I'm going to send out to the rest of the transportation committee and then send it out to our cluster as a whole, just to get a feeling on where the people who use the transportation find the biggest find their needs. And it's everything from, you know, do you need a crosswalk here? It's a whole list of things. It's similar to the one that I sent out in 2017. If you remember that, we did that survey in 2017 and got a really good list that was able to help inform us of some of the concerns of the community. So I will send that out to the transportation committee, and once that's finalized, I'll send it out to the commission as a whole, so that we can, you know, try to get as much information from our constituents, from the citizens of Annapolis as possible about transportation concerns. But I think right now, you know, certainly the priority is making sure that those transportation positions are funded, and not only funded, but are filled, and we get the transportation software up and running. Because once we're back in school, or if we're in some sort of hybrid environment, it's just going to be really important.
Okay, Janet, you said that you were going to propose a motion. Can you type that up and distribute it via chat, and then we'll discuss.
Sure.
So Jeff, can we go back to my concern now? Is this the right time, or should I wait?
Sure, we're waiting for Janet to type up her proposed resolution.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah,
It'll take me a minute. So go ahead with Odessa.
Yeah. Go ahead, Odessa. The floor is yours for public comment.
Okay, well, first of all, wait a minute. You know, I want to say right now that the Black community is in a state of trauma. Every other day, it seems like somebody is dying, especially the young people. So my concern with this virtual learning, and Ms. Ravian, I sent you an email. Did you see my email about the Chromebooks? Well, you can answer that later. But I sent a letter to Dr. Alada and some other people about Chromebooks and Wi-Fi. Our kids are really going to be behind because there's just doesn't seem to be, so far the board hasn't given any direction on just exactly how they're going to be dealing with the low income communities with this virtual learning. We have, especially the elementary kids, because we have so many children that are in homes that may not get the attention that they need. For instance, to wake up in the morning, whatever time I think they have to be in class, but to make sure that that child will wake up and turn on his Chromebook. I know it's the parents' responsibility, but some of these kids come from homes that have low parents, or something. The parents don't know really how to even support their kids. So my question is, from the board and from this commission, how are we going to keep these kids motivated and keep them in touch with the learning process? I would like to see, and first of all, the Chromebooks haven't even been distributed. There are so many kids in homes right now that don't have Chromebooks. They don't have Chromebooks, they don't have Wi-Fi. What are we going to do? You know, September the 8th is around the corner. What are we going to do to assure that these young people, especially the elementary, the high school kids can pretty much take care of themselves, but the elementary kids they are really going to be left behind. So my question is, I sent an email to Dr. Lotto. He responded and saying that they're waiting to get 60,000 Chromebooks, and they're trying to get the Wi-Fi set up. My suggestion was that they try to get in contact with the people at the housing authority to see if they can use some of that space for some of the kids to go in the morning and to use, to go online and try to get, to get their education in some centers, community centers. And then I was told today that the American Legion on Forest Drive is willing to help. And I think the Boys and Girls Club also, but there hasn't been much communication from the board on collaboration and how this is going to work out. So I don't know whether the commission can kind of like try to from the board to see just exactly how they're going to work with the the students, especially the elementary kids, to make sure that they are going to be online with Chromebooks and Wi-Fi. But in the meantime, like I said, the communities are in trauma. I mean, we've had so many deaths. And even today, I don't know how many people do Robert Eves. I heard that he passed away. And he was a very important figure in the
Oh
the Black
dear.
community.
Sorry to
Did
hear that.
you know Robert Eves?
Yes,
Oh,
I'm
I'm
sorry
so
to hear
sorry to hear that.
that. Gosh,
Yeah, well, he
a
he
big
passed away
loss.
today.
That's a big loss.
It's a big loss, right? So I mean, right now there's been so much trauma going on, and maybe Mr. Starks, Mr. Starks, are you there? Kenneth Starks?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, can you speak up to some of the issues or the things that I'm speaking about?
Well, see, I know Ms. Finlayson is going to speak in a second, but just go on. What you're saying is it's a compact issue that's in Annapolis, but I think it's spread up throughout the United States. To be honest, it's coming to, I think, with this COVID and where we are as a nation, it's being lifted to, it's being exposed, right? For lack of a better word, that the balance is not balanced, it's not equally yoked. So that is a different piece. So now you have complexities of our neighborhoods in a different mentality, and now you compound it with lack of learning. Now you have no instruction. The bigger thing to me than a Chromebook and Wi-Fi is what Ms. Odessa said, getting the kids online, period. You can have the Wi-Fi, you can have the Chromebook, but I know so many kids that it was a beat down struggle just to get them to come online every day. So I don't know what to do. I just know that what Ted is talking about is I'm part of that group, right? What Ted is talking about, the collaborative nonprofits, and it's amazing because what it does is sends all of the nonprofits to every neighborhood, in essence, to assist on whatever level that neighborhood needs. And it's a collective group that takes away from this is what we do, and we just do it for the betterment of the neighborhood. So with the outdoor classrooms, along with the centers that will be open, I think that will help the Board of Education out with finding spots to do, to have class. And then you have volunteers in the community that jumped on this panel alone, that are willing to go out into the communities to help engage with the students. And then I know the board is working with all the TSAs that's going to come back in the TAs, that's what they're going to be doing. They're going to be having caseloads working with kids. It was a trial run during the original closing out of the school year where we all had caseloads, but it was new. So I think it'll get better. But I will have to mention that no one in this room, country, or whatever has been through this before. So this is new. So I think patience along with pressure, if that makes sense. Patience with, I understand this is new, but pressure that these things need to be met. Transportation is huge because like Jess and the rest of pushing, when that turns around, we have to have those things in place that now the kids can get to school. So I definitely know with everything going on in the community, education, one way or the other, is the only way. So we have to pull together to help out.
Now, I haven't heard anything like about the TAs and the TSAs and what they're doing. Have you heard something that I haven't heard? I haven't seen anything.
Right. You might not see anything, but I know that talking with our supervisors, that's the momentum going in. No one knows exactly what's going to happen, but the way it worked out last year, it's natural. So we're expecting that, and we're getting prepared for that. If that's the case, otherwise, it's like, what else would you do? You can't walk the halls if you can't go into school. So you're going to be assigned to work with caseloads, and I don't know how that looks. I think they're figuring out how that looks.
So are they going to be using the rec centers and the community centers and places like that for some of these kids?
I don't know. I think that might be a community effort. That's above me.
Odessa and Ken, thanks very much for bringing these points up. I think this is a natural segue into Alderwoman Finlayson's point. Sheila, do you have something to say quickly, and then we'll go back to Janet's resolution, and then we'll yield to you for the longer discussion.
Okay, thank you. During the spring, and I want to say last spring like it was a long time ago, and it really wasn't, I reached out to the principal, by example, of Mills Parole Elementary School to see what help was needed, because the newspaper said 35,000 kids did not get their Chromebooks. I learned from the principal that he and his faculty created a plan, and they reached every single kid in their school except for 12. And he's had well over 600 kids. So each school had their own plan. They went to the homes. So the kids were not without the Chromebooks. Now, there's no question there was an issue with the Wi-Fi. And I offered to help raise funds so that they could get those little portable Wi-Fis. However, hotspots is what we were talking about. They were on back order. So the Board of Ed couldn't even get those because everybody else in the country was trying to buy those also. So, the young people have the Chromebooks. The issue is that the kids are telling their parents they're not doing it. And that was the biggest challenge that the principal, the teachers, the assistants were all having, making the kids do the work. And I'm not sure, I would like to say we can all adopt a community or a school and follow up, but there's more to be said to making kids do something, and maybe it's the type of instruction they receive, maybe it has to be more fun or more interactive or something. And I hope that that's what the school system is working on, how to get some of these young kids, some of them are self-motivated, but there's a population who are not. And they see out of school meaning out of school. So I don't have to do anything. But the Board of Ed is providing the Chromebooks, and Comcast is providing Wi-Fi. So it's a matter of tapping into the resources that are there. But there's no question that there can be help from the community. There are also kinds of liability issues also. So if we take a group of kids into a community center, something happens, you know, then what? So there's things to consider. But I don't believe, from what I've heard and experienced, that the schools are ignoring these kids. They are trying to find ways to reach them. The teachers are in the communities. And Mr. Stark, you're shaking your head because I know you've been out there with the faculty from Annapolis High School. They have been trying to get to every one of these kids to help them continue their education.
But would you say that that's the problem, is trying to get especially the elementary students, is trying to get them on the Chromebooks to do their work? Because my understanding that at Mill Parole Elementary, that they only had maybe about 61 out of 600 kids to sign in. So
that's not what
that's a problem.
That's what people told me. And I offered to help, to go door to door with him. There were 12 kids that they had not been able to reach. They've gone to their homes, met them in parking lots and stores and wherever they, you know, so.
But I think there's a difference between not being able to reach and kids that were actively engaged. I know in my conversations with both Annapolis Middle and Eastport is that, you know, families, I will say that, so they only gave Chromebooks to families that had, they were, for most of the time in the spring, they were only giving one Chromebook per family. And then as of the middle of May, Title I started giving two Chromebooks to any family that had 2 or more children. They would get a second Chromebook. The plan for the fall is to have 1-to-1 Chromebooks for all elementary school, and then give out Chromebooks to the middle and high schools once those needs have been satisfied. And I know that the teachers are working on that. I know with Eastport Elementary, we had, out of our 300 children, 24 that never engaged with, you know, they had connected with them. We only had one family that we lost, but we had 24 families, 24 students that never connected and actively engaged. So we connected with them, but they never actively engaged. They did not.
Okay, Jess, I'm gonna jump in. Councilwoman Rodvian and then Kayla Golder.
Thank you. I wanted to just add to the conversation. I think one thing that will probably help, at least at the middle and the high school level, is the change in the grading policy. I know that, okay. I know that from my own students, once they sort of figured out how you could sort of game the system to get the credit for the class, all of a sudden the goal became doing the very bare minimum to get what you needed to pass the class. And I mean, unfortunately, we see this regularly with the grading policy, you know, as it is ordinarily, but then the grading policy became even more generous during online learning. And I think appropriately so, given the circumstances that a lot of families were facing. But I do think once the schools move back to, you know, sort of the regular grading policy, that will probably help at least some with the motivation. Now, how is that going to help kindergartner, first, second grader? I'm not experienced with elementary and what kind of things motivate them. I don't think grades are a big motivator at that age. But folks, I see other folks want to chime in. So,
Kayla.
So I just wanted to join in and say, yeah, I don't think, yes, the lower income, you have the problem of the Wi-Fi and such as that, but I live in a middle class neighborhood, and my friends, as soon as they figured out the grading system, they're like, I'm not doing this work anymore. It's not worth it. It's not the point. So for me personally, I know my neighborhood has just been talking about, for the younger kids, just specifically, like once the older kids finish their work for school, that we go in and help, because you also have to think about a lot of people are going back to work. So their younger kids are going to be home alone to try and figure out how to do school by themselves. So yes, the lower income families do have a disadvantage, but we have to look at everyone because a lot of people just aren't going to do the work in general because they say, oh, it's online. I don't have to, because I know personally my teachers and teachers in the high school, you had a lot of high schoolers who just didn't do the work, and the teachers were emailing the parents, and the parents were like, oh, you need to go do your work, but they still don't care and they still don't do it. So it's accountability as a high schooler. Yeah, it should be easy for us to do it compared to an elementary school child, but we're still kids at the same time, and we see that, oh, we're at home, so we don't need to do work. So.
Okay, Laura, and then Jess, and then that's it for this stream. We're going to go to Janet's resolution, and then we need to approve the minutes here. Laura.
As I said, I had a long conversation with Ms. Armstead at Monarch today about this very issue. And one of the things that they did, now they have a large population of farm students and also a large population of ELL students. So what they have been working towards, and she's actually continuing to hire people, is basically established an adult buddy for the students so that there is an adult who checks in with these students. And if they're not checking in online, if they're not submitting their work, that person contacts them and basically works with them during the day and gives them sort of personal one-on-one attention to kind of get them to tune in. And she said she was able to take a lot of the in-school resource aids, there are behavioral interventionists, for example, and utilize that personnel in these positions. And going forwards into the fall, she's actually staffing more people in those positions, specifically bilingual teachers' aides and things that can function as these sort of buddies for the students to make sure that they're getting online and that they're getting their work done, and that they're getting assistance if they need it to help them get that work done. So I would love to see us maybe sort of expanding that community-wide. I'm sure there are other people in the community outside of specifically teachers and teachers' aides who, you know, a lot of these foundations that Ted was talking about earlier, Ken's group, that would be willing to function in that sort of position as sort of, I am an adult that's going to hold this kid accountable and help keep them focused and sort of keep a little pressure on them to help them get their work done, regardless of whatever age group they fall into.
Thank you, Jess. And then we'll go to Janet's resolution.
Laura, I just want to say that was a conversation that I had today as the Eastport Elementary PTA with our principal as well. And we are instituting something similar where we will be working on, because one of the issues, and this is what I was going to say, was one of the issues that we haven't brought up is also the language barrier issue. One of the big problems in the elementary school in terms of connection, and the majority of those children that I mentioned earlier are English language learners, is that none of the instructional material, not the learning material, but this is what you need to do today, this is how it needs to be done, you need to log into Mac and V, and none of that came out in Spanish. And so there was no way for children who don't know how to read yet, there was no way for them to know what they were supposed to do. And for parents who don't read English, then there was no way for them to assist their children. And so that is a huge issue that I have brought up and asked about multiple times, and I have not received, this is since April, I've asked Mr. Mosier and other people within the school system about this, and I have not received any response into how this is going to be handled for this coming year. But it is a huge barrier to those families getting their children online and connected and participating, because if the parents can't understand, I mean, I know as a parent of a kindergartner and a second grader that I had to walk my kids through everything that they were doing each day to make sure that they were following the rules. And if that information isn't provided in a language that I could understand, there would be no way that I could help them do that.
Yeah, okay. Thanks. Thanks very much for that comment. Okay, Janet, you have you put a motion on the floor here. Can you read that, please? And then we'll go into discussion if there is any.
I put two motions on the floor.
Okay.
The first was a straw man, and then possibly some edits to that as the second motion. The motion, as I have it drafted, is the Annapolis Education Commission urges AACPS administration to fill as soon as possible the 7 transportation positions funded in the 2020-21 budget. As we look forward to students returning to school buildings, it is vital we have a transportation department that is able to ensure safe and timely transportation for all students that need, especially for the Annapolis cluster, who has long advocated for this need.
Okay, Brianna, do you have a clean copy of that? Okay, so there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Raise your hand, please. Okay, there's a second. So let's open up a discussion if there is any.
Jeff, I do have a question, and it's not a question, it's clarification. What are we directing them? What was the verb that was used there, Janet?
It's urges.
Okay, thank you.
Education Commission urges the administration to fill as soon as possible the 7 positions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further discussion on Janet's motion? Okay.
Brianna,
if
just
there
if
is-
you're gonna fix, there's a D missing in
Forward,
forward.
yep, I see that.
All right, if there is none, let's call the roll here. Ward 1, Brianna, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, Ward 3, Enid Collison Lee. Nothing heard.
Right.
Kayla,
Yes, can you hear me, Jeff?
got it?
Okay.
Yes, for Enid. Kayla, Ward 4, Golder.
Yes.
Ward 5 is not represented, Olga Cortez, nor is Ward 6. Ward 7, Laura Booth.
Yes.
Ward 8, Jess Packler.
Yes.
At large A, Odessa Ellis.
Yes.
At large C, Janet Norman.
Yes,
At large D, Ken Starks.
Yes.
Okay, Alderwoman Finlayson.
Aye.
Okay, and the chair votes yes as well. So that's unanimous. Brianna, you have a good copy of the verbiage? Okay.
Yes, I do.
Okay, thanks very much. Next on the agenda here is Alderwoman Finlayson, who held a town hall forum a few days ago entitled "Where Do We Go From Here?" on racial reconciliation and some racial issues. Alderwoman Finlayson, to you.
Well, thank you, Jeff, for the invitation, and thank you again for participating. At the end of June, I held the first of 2 panels under the theme, "Where do we go from here?" which the objective is to come up with some hard solutions, strategies, answers to dealing with racial injustices in our city. In June, my panel, it never fails. In June, I had the mayor, the police chief, Alderman Gay, Alderman Rodriguez, Superintendent George Arlotto, Carl Snowden from the caucus, Dr. Charlestine Fairley from the Community Action Agency, Amy Cruz from the ACLU, and Jackie Alsip from the NAACP, and Andre Dillard, principal of Georgetown East Elementary School and a member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. The second panel, which was held last Wednesday, consisted of Alderman Arnett, Alderman Savage, our own Jeff McCree, Rob Savage from Creating Communities, Naz Afi from the NEA and the president of the Annapolis chapter of Delta Sigma Theta, and our own Kayla Golder, who's a member of the commission. A very different group to hear different perspectives on answering the question. And they were each on both panels asked the same question. And that question is, where do we go from here? Ross Arnett acknowledged right from the start that he was kind of in a different place because he had not experienced racial injustice like most of us have. And so he had more questions about how we work together, how we come up with a win-win solution, how we address the needs of the community as a whole. But most importantly, he wanted clear communication and an honesty and dialogue. Rob Savage, also a member of the City Council, wanted to begin by saying conversation is key and that the government has a role in being a facilitator of that conversation. He had 3 issues that he wants us to look at. One are the social issues, social injustices. That's inequity in education, inequity in housing, living wage, finding after-school programs, and the like, all sorts of inequities. His second position was reform in the police department. And that means requiring different standards, such as de-escalation, or the process or the training in de-escalating situations, disarming before shooting, the police having a clear line of authority and requiring reporting on incidents that are inappropriate. It includes implicit bias training on a quarterly basis. His third point was hiring the right people to help us. You know, I have been proposing a Department of Social Caring, which will deal with all of these social issues that we've been concerned about, dealing with behavioral science techniques brought in by specialists, and again, having a clear dialogue on defunding the police. Our own Jeff McCree was our next speaker, and Jeff shared with us a PowerPoint presentation. And Jeff, I'm not sure whether you've shared that with the Education Commission or not, but it opened.
Sheila, they were slides pulled from previous Annapolis Education Commission meetings. Nothing new.
Well, it was wonderful, and it opened the eyes of all of the panelists, because clearly it demonstrated that our young people in the elementary and middle schools are performing way below proficiency. However, our graduation rate is, I don't want to say it's stellar, but it's in the 90 percentile. So there's a disconnect here, because we are not performing well on our standardized proficiency evaluations, but our graduation rate is high, which means, are we preparing young people to go into the world and be productive members of our community? Jeff spoke to the inequity of performance across the board, to rekindling that Justice Department lawsuit that was filed. I think it's been 20 years now since that case was filed. He also highlighted or encouraged non-college pathways in technical trainings and vocational trainings, and increasing offerings across the board. And lastly, looking at alternative schools, such as the KIPP Charter School that we had almost 15 years ago. And again, thank you, Jeff, for participating. Your remarks were very poignant and they hit the mark. Our next speaker was Rob Levitt. You know Rob Levitt as the creator of Creating Communities, and he's all about the arts. And so he began with a quote, and his quote is, "Communities that create together relate together. Communities that relate together create together." And he shared with us an anecdote of meeting a young student at Tyler Heights, who he solicited to participate in his activity when the teacher and the principal were saying, no, don't select him. And he chose him anyway, only to find out later that this young man had a speech impediment and had never wanted to participate in anything. And with Rob's encouragement, this young man got up in front of the school and performed beautifully. And so illustrating the need for the arts and the ability to reach all students. He highlighted a program entitled When Words Fail. He pushed hard on making art a part of everyone's existence. And even during the pandemic, and we're still dealing with the pandemic, but he and his organization are still providing arts materials to the community. So he's still out there working, and he wanted us to highlight the fact that they're still in the community regardless of the pandemic. Our next speaker was Kayla Golder, our member of the commission. Kayla, as you know, is a rising junior at Annapolis High School. And she started by saying, "Who would have thought we'd still be living it?" referring to the civil rights movement. She stressed that her biggest concern is dealing with the police, and she thinks we should be reallocating their funding. She acknowledged that social media has had a tremendous impact on the issues that we're facing today, which is a good thing. We ought to be focusing on the youth. They recognize that there is power in voting and that the young people should be educated on what the real purpose of the police are in our community. We should continue working with the school curriculum, and adults need to listen to the young people. And our last participant was Miss Naz Afi. Naz is works at the NEA, the National Education Association in Washington, D.C., and she's the president of the local chapter of Delta Sigma Theta sorority. She began by stressing the need for all of us to work together and the fact that this is not something we're going to fix overnight. Her sorority works with a number of organizations to try to harness all of the energy to make a difference in the community. She stresses that there is a need for allies across the board, regardless of color, race, gender. Everyone needs to be working together. And that all programs need to address social action. Terminology. And as an educator, she feels that strongly that we should be clearly defining terminology, such as obnoxious behavior, which is pretty subjective depending upon who's using it and who's observing it. There should be diversity in our hiring panels, and that we should look closely at who's making decisions about various programs, such as the IB program, and moving from STEM to STEAM programming. We should be looking at helping the home. And this goes back to what Odessa was stressing a little bit earlier. The rules need to be evaluated so that there is not a disparate treatment of young people, regardless of their clothing, their hair, their socioeconomic status. We need to be very critical of how we respond to one another. The global communities course, she feels should be moved into, not eliminated because that's a requirement for graduation, but it should start at a much earlier grade. That we should be hiring teachers that look like our students, increase workforce training, and we need to listen to the young people, listen to the community, and have very frank discussions. After all of the speakers finished, we had a question answer period, and we answered a few questions from the audience. But our panelists also had questions. Ross Arnett, for example, had questions about how we can impact education. Since education is a county function and the city, other than through our tax dollars, does not contribute to education, what is it that we could be doing differently to impact the education of our children and all children? He questioned what defunding of the police meant to everyone and spoke about the city budget because two of the panelists, myself and Ross, are on our city finance committee. And we'll be getting into our budget beginning in the fall. And so you can believe that we're going to have a discussion about how we're allocating the dollars that we do have within the city. You know, I have been pushing, as has he, for the Office of Community Caring, which we have funding for through the end of the year and hopefully on into next year and into the future. He also questioned how we can bring our sororities and our fraternities in to work with us as partners in working in our community. Nas stressed communication and working in the community. Ms. Golder said race is the #1 issue and that there should be accountability for everyone equally across the board. And she cited the example of what happened at Broadneck High School last year when the young person who used a derogatory comment to one of our Annapolis High players never did apologize to the student. The coach apologized, but the student never did. And so, you know, that gives minority students a feeling of being less than. There should be same treatment for everyone across the board. And Mr. Levitt ended our evening by saying leadership development is the key. And he stressed a book for us, recommended a book for us to read, The Regenerative Life. And so that's on our list. So that was our panel. There will be a third one and hopefully a final one in September with still a different group of community leaders, with the plan of, as a council, sitting down to talk about, not just talk about, but creating a strategy, a plan for how we move our city forward as far as racial injustice is concerned. So I'll take questions if there are questions. If not, thank you very much, Jeff, for the opportunity to share.
Thank you, Sheila. That was a very informative summary, I think, of a more informative presentation and town hall meeting. Janet, and then Councilwoman Rabian.
Sure, Alderman Lason, that sounds like an amazing set of discussions. So my question is, are there some archived versions of the panel discussions that we all as a commission could watch and then have a fuller discussion with you of like what action items we can help move forward? I love the idea of possibly moving the global course to middle school. It can still be a high school requirement, just like French and math and things that are high school credits in middle school. But maybe it's easier to fit in the schedule and maybe it's more developmentally appropriate there. But do you know if we could watch the sessions in an archived way?
Absolutely. All of our Zoom meetings are on YouTube. We have come into the new millennium and, you know, okay. So you can go to YouTube and I think you would put in, where do we go from here, town hall. And you'll see both of them, but all of our meetings are on YouTube. And Julian, you can correct me if I'm wrong. They can go to YouTube or there's another site, I believe. Maybe it's Facebook, but they are on. And I think there's a link on the city webpage also.
Okay, I'll make sure I share with the Annapolis High PTSA community. So if any of us as possible can observe all those good discussions.
Well, and I would entertain if the Education Commission would like to have your own and come up with your own ideas to merge with the ones I've gathered so far, I would welcome that.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Real quick, if you want, Sheila, I can send it off to Jeff. I can send both links to Jeff if Jeff, you don't want to.
Okay, that would be great. So Jeff will get the link and he can share. Thank you, Julian.
Councilwoman Rodvian and then Kayla.
Thank you. One thing I wanted to suggest is I think it might be very helpful to look very, very closely at how resources are distributed among student groups across the entire school system. I know from my experience that as a teacher in the school system, that, for example, in IB classes, advanced level classes, you might have a very small number of students. For magnet programs that are possibly inaccessible for some students if they don't have transportation to consolidated bus stops, that we spend a significant amount of funds transporting students to programs that really are not accessible, that are not realistically accessible to all students. I know that in some of the magnet programs, there are special opportunities that, maybe some of those funds come from federal and state grants, but there are special opportunities for students to take field trips, to engage in specific activities. Meanwhile, students that are, participating in the general education program of our, the comprehensive high schools often have very large classes, don't get, those unique and special opportunities, don't get the individualized and special attention, even though you might look at, those students that are sort of coming in with the most obstacles as needing the most support. And to be taking resources and concentrating them on students that already have a lot of support, whereas students that really need support aren't getting, in some ways they are getting some things, but I think it would be helpful to really look at the distribution of resources across race and class.
Thank you. And I think that was kind of touched on a bit in maybe it was Naz's presentation, but that is definitely an issue that needs to be discussed further. And I could give you an example anecdotally. I don't know how much time we have. A few years I was involved in the middle college program where we took 20 20 young men, they weren't all African Americans, from Annapolis High School to what was then Sojourner Douglas College. And I was their English teacher, and they had an MIT professor teaching them math. And these young men could not read and write when they came in as 10th graders. And by the time they got to their senior year, they were reading and writing, and we had taken them to New York to the theater and to see President Obama as he was running for office. But we gave them experiences they could not have gotten in any other way. And the middle college program through Dr. Fairley paid for it. Wasn't the resources of the school system, because the school system couldn't have afforded it. But we knew that we had to give these young men different opportunities so that they would be successful. And most of them, not all of them, and I'll be honest with you, but most of them met with success. So,
and that program doesn't exist anymore.
It does not.
And that's why is that the case? That's a rhetorical question, not one that.
It's all about the Benjamins, it's all about funding. And that's exactly what you're talking about. We have a lot of money for certain programs and very little for other programs.
Kayla and Jess.
So I would just like to piggyback off of the global tradition thing, bring it into such things as like the middle school, as well as I think that's a great and excellent idea. I don't think it's feasibly possible for that to happen. Number one, although for my class, it was not a graduation requirement, not a lot of kids take that class very seriously. Second of all, for me in middle school, I was in a magnet program. So in middle school, you have 6 periods. I had my 4 regular classes, like math, English, science, and social studies. And then I had my PVA credits. So I had to do 2 hours of PVA, which then left me 2 classes left. I have to get my gym and health credit. And so it would share through semesters. So one semester I would take gym and health. And then the second semester I would finally be able to take the class that I want to. So if you then bring that class into middle school, they're going to have to chop away from the arts, and kids are coming for the arts to have this longer time for the arts, and they won't be able to have that due to that. So then there would necessarily, not to say that we shouldn't have the class, it's just that there wouldn't be a need for kids to be traveling from Glen Burnie or from wherever they're coming from to attend PVA, when they, at that point, honestly, could just take a general art class or a general writing or dance class, you know?
Yeah, it's tight.
So I
Thank you,
just
Kayla.
don't think it's that feasible, because I'm thinking about how in middle school, I would just wait until it came to that semester where I finally got to take a class that I wanted to take, because the general kids who weren't in PVA got to take 2 encore classes. So they got to mix it up. I didn't. I only got 1 class, and that was it. I also had to take a language. So I didn't get to pick the language either. So
It is tight.
Thank you, Kayla. Jess?
I agree that the scheduling in middle school might be difficult. I actually think that it's a class that really should be brought down to the elementary school level. I don't think that we should be waiting until middle school to have these discussions in a class level. I think it's something that we should be having in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. I think studies have shown that the prime year for bullying and issues with that is 7th grade. So I think that we need to start it earlier. The other thing that I was going to say, I wanted to piggyback on what Lisa was saying, because I think those issues of equity in terms of funding and everything are particularly pronounced here in our cluster, because a lot of the issues that you're talking about, it's one thing when you're talking about PVA and STEM and the other programs, but even in general education, in the Broadneck middle schools, all children, for the most part, get to, I think it's all children are able to attend all field trips that general education students offer. Whereas at Annapolis Middle, you can only go if you can afford the field trip. The same thing happens in the elementary school level. If the PTA, and a lot of that is what it comes down to, is PTA. The PTA is able to afford supporting those things. And if you have schools that are high poverty schools, the PTAs don't have that funding to do it. So, you look at Georgetown East and the number of field trips that they're able to go on outside the mandated field trips, and it's 0. Same thing with Mills Parole. They are not able to afford those opportunities, and those field trips, those experiences are the ones that really can make a difference. And they may just seem like something fun, but really that opportunity is really important. And then it just adds to that sort of inequity that spreads all the way up. And then the same thing happens when you get to those specialty programs. If you have a specialty school, Annapolis is an IB school, and it's all IB. So technically everybody should be able to take part in the opportunities that are there for that are specific about the IB program, but they can't unless they have the personal finances to support those opportunities. And that really just creates just a continual lack of equity and a division and a separation between our students that's not fair and needs to be addressed. It's a serious issue, and it is particularly given the number of given the concentration of poverty that we have in the Annapolis cluster. It affects us more than it affects any other cluster.
can I say something real quick?
Sure, Kayla, you've got the last word here.
Just to piggy off of,
Can I say something?
Annapolis also has ROTC, PVA, and IB, among other programs, to help kids, such as extra reading classes with like one-on-one teachers. But now as we all know, I'm a junior, so I haven't gotten into that real IB program yet. But from as far as I know and through experience, the sole IB field trips that I took were paid for. I didn't have to pay. My parents didn't have to pay.
I was talking about Annapolis Middle, not Annapolis High School.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Because I was like, those are paid for. They take us. We don't.
Yeah. At Annapolis Middle, you only get to go if you can afford it yourself.
So Jeff, can
Jeff?
I say something? Jeff,
Please go ahead,
okay.
Odessa.
You mentioned the KIPP Academy that was here about 15 years ago.
Mhm.
I was part of that initiative and helped recruit the students for that school. But Anne Arundel County Public Schools did not want a charter school. It's sort of like anti-charter. And so the other night you mentioned that we should try to get another KIPP Academy here. I'm just wondering, are we going to try to do that? Are we going to try to get another KIPP Academy or a charter school here? Because I think that it would make a big difference as far as our African American males.
So Sheila put out on the floor a suggestion that we maybe devote a future meeting toward setting some priorities as to what we may want to lobby for and work in coordination with the city council and other leaders. In the past, we'd set out a number of different priorities each school year. Maybe this is something that we ought to talk about. We don't have a formal agenda right now at this point for the September meeting. I'm open to making this a brainstorming session to see what big items we may want to lobby for and push forward on our agenda. Maybe we spend a couple of minutes talking about that here. What do you think, Odessa? Do you think that's appropriate? And if so, what's the right time frame to make that to do that brainstorming session?
Well, I mean, Sheila, do you plan to have another meeting to summarize everything that has been said? Where do we go from here? Do you plan to follow up on that? And then maybe we can try to talk about trying to get a KIPP Academy or that Sojourner Douglas school that we had down in Sojourner Douglas for males.
Well, my plan was to have 3 town halls to solicit information from various people in the community. Tonight, as a result of our discussion, I thought this body would be a great addition to those 3 town halls. We could have our own discussion separate and apart from the town halls. And all of this information is going to be compiled and presented to the city council. My hope is that we will be able to, 1, pass some legislation that will put some things in place, some rules and practices that we'll be able to live by, whether they're things that we need to be financing through our budget or changes that need to be made in the police department or lobbying efforts that need to take place with the school board and others. So, I open that door for this body to be part of the discussion, and our notes will become, part of the overall discussion.
Well, I think that, the last few months have shined a light on the inequities in our school system, especially in the Annapolis area. So, we have an IB, PVA, and those other programs, but we don't really have anything to help the struggling low-income student, especially our African-American males. So I would like for us to try, is that a resolution or, how do you introduce that we continue a discussion on trying to get another KIPP Academy here or a charter school for our young African-American males or men of color?
Well, I think that should be part of the overall discussion. What strategies do we want to endorse? If a charter school is the strategy we want to endorse, and we do have 1 charter school, the Science Point Charter School is the other one that started at the same time that KIPP began. but you're absolutely right. There was a complete opposition to charter schools, and they were funded differently and the whole bit. But I think it should be part of the overall commission's discussion. If we want to come up with an outline of different strategies we would like to see implemented.
Okay,
And
so
Jeff,
do-
I would like for us to add, because I've heard Jess mention it more than once, about the inequity in our schools in the city. You know, if we have schools that don't have PTAs, maybe that's a role for this commission. Maybe we need to go out and seek out organizations. And I was late for the meeting because I had another meeting, and I apologize, but I heard Mr. Starks talking about an organization of organizations. So we've got volunteer groups out there, and why couldn't we ask one of these groups to volunteer and support a given elementary school to make sure that every kid in that school gets to go on the field trips, you know, or has whatever backpacks they need at the beginning of the year or whatever. I mean, that takes some work on our part, but that's what we should be, I think, that's what we should be doing. So I would like for that to be on the list, for us to pursue getting the support for those schools that need it through partnering with community organizations.
Ken,
So-
Enid, and Jess.
So did we make a
I'll be real
proposal?
brief. I'll be extremely brief. I think that's the model we're going in, where government, I wouldn't say has less of a role, but communities and organizations pitch in and make it like a cooperative, right? Where everyone then for the betterment of the entire community. So we see a need, we feel a need. And I think what Alderwoman Van Layson saying is exactly on point, that maybe that could be that piece where you find a need, everyone adopt a school or however it looks. And then you say, okay, what are your needs? What are your expectations? What are your field trips? What do you need? What are your issues? Go and ask the school what their issues are, how can we service them, and then service them best we can in those ways. Because a lot of us have means to bigger resources and can go out and fundraise and generate the money to do those things. And I think this is I think because of the pandemic, we're in that area where we can be that creative to get involved in a whole new dynamic.
Thank you, Ken, Enid, and then Jess. Enid, I think you're still
You're on mute.
muted.
Okay, I was also late getting to the meeting, and it's ironic we're talking about PTAs. I had reached out to, after hearing from Jess that they didn't have a PTA, I did contact the new principal, who this is like the third principal in 2 years, and told him that I offered to help him, and I was gonna reach out to the commission to get someone else to help me with that. And he's new to this area. So I've already told him I would help him try to get a PTA together, since I grew up in this neighborhood and I know some people that he may not know. But it's ironic because I was late because I just found out that the young lady who I happened to be when my kids went to Millsboro, I was the president. And I don't know how many of you know Curly Queen, but she was the vice president with me. And I just found out today that she just passed from COVID. So I
What's her
was a little
name?
late getting on. And second of all, and then 5 minutes later, I got a call that Robert Eads, who the city council knows very well, also passed today. So I apologize. But I just wanted to let you know that I did reach out to the school. So anyone who can help me with that, I would appreciate it.
So Jeff, can we make a proposal, something about the KIPP Academy or a charter school? I mean, what do we do? What's the,
Odessa, let's hear from Jess first, and then we'll circle back to you, okay? And
Okay.
we'll set up a path forward. Jess.
I just want to remind everyone, we do have Monarch Academy here in Monarch Annapolis, is a charter school here in the city of Annapolis.
no?
Contract school.
Well, it's a contract school, but it's a contract school, which if it was, it's called a contract school so that they could focus on servicing just our cluster. Being a contract school means that the only difference between doing a contract school and a charter school is that a charter school has to be open to the entire county, and a contract school that's the primary difference, is the contract school can be directed at one cluster, which is how Monarch was open. But I did want to, I know you had said something about the September meeting. I think the idea of us having a town hall is fantastic. I would love to do that. I think we discussed that at our last meeting. And, you know, bringing the public in and making, you know, getting more feedback, I think is really important. I do, however, think our September meeting needs to be focused on what is happening in the school system and in e-learning and the things ahead. Right now, we don't have any information on what's happening next year, other than the brief that Dr. Alato gave at the last Board of Ed meeting. And given that our next meeting will be right at the beginning of the school year, I really would hope that we would spend the majority of that meeting focusing on what is happening in this for the e-learning, how that's happening and how it's being rolled out, and how we can support all the issues that we've discussed today in terms of making sure that everyone has computers and that type of thing. And I also want to say I really support the idea of bringing the community into the PTA. That has worked really well at Eastport. And I think it would be a great idea. Maybe if we had more community involvement, I wouldn't be the president of 2 PTAs at the moment. So that's so anyway, but I really and I also wanted to ask Jeff if you were able to pass those questions on to Bob, and if you had heard anything back from him regarding them.
Yeah, I got your 13 questions here, Jess, and I will forward them, combine them with any of their questions that come up tonight and forward them on to him after the meeting.
Great,
Jeff,
thank you.
Yes.
how you doing? This is Adatola Ajayi. I had a couple questions and I wanted to ask.
Yes, can you please, I'm sorry, sir, can you identify yourself?
Yes, Adatola Ajayi, African American Community Service Specialist for the Mayor's Office. Okay.
Thank you, go ahead.
Thank you. Greetings, all of you. So one statement question I wanted to ask, is there a way to determine how many students are coming from outside of the Annapolis area to go to Annapolis High School for these for the different programs that are offered?
The city council looked into that last year with the facilities, and Alderwoman, wasn't it approximately something like a 240 net gain of magnet students that wouldn't have already been in the Annapolis cluster?
Okay.
Jeff, I thought you had those numbers. Do you recall?
I think Janet is about right. I don't remember specifically, but I seem to remember between 200 and 300.
Okay, because I did watch the other town hall you did. Thank you, Sheila, Alderman Finlayson, and Jeff. Thank you for having that data, because it was kind of alarming for me to see how overcrowded Annapolis High was. And then I thought, well, what about all these students that are coming in? Yes, it's great that they do have the opportunity to take these different programs, but it basically makes sure that the students in Annapolis will never have a chance to even attempt to apply for these programs if they didn't do it in middle school. And then again, the parent situation is another situation to get the parents involved. But my other statement was, because we are dealing with the e-learning situation, but then also when George Floyd died, there was a lot of talk about, is the curriculum culturally competent, particularly for Black males, right? And so I'm thinking, even with the e-learning, how are we really determining if this is actually culturally competent for African Americans? And I know Jess had spoke about Latino, the language barrier there, but I think that's something that the school system, I know they have an Office of Equity, but I'm not too sure that they've developed a way to really survey or determine, is this a really cultural competent curriculum? And then even with the e-learning, it was just put out there, and even we're going into another semester where they'll be doing e-learning, but who is evaluating the curriculums that the teachers are designing, right? Because I'm not sure, but I'm thinking that each teacher can pretty much create their own curriculum, as long as it stays within the boundaries of what the school system has approved. And the only reason I say that is because I know one situation where someone told me the teacher was teaching them a book that was not in the curriculum, and the book kept referencing the N-word. And this was a student at Broadneck, or in the Broadneck cluster, right? And the student, being one of the few Black people in the class, was very alarmed and telling their mother, like, I think this is wrong. Now the mother, because she works in the school system, she was able to take care of the situation, right? But I just think a lot of times that's an issue, particularly my son, he went to Annapolis Middle School, and there were a lot of issues where if I didn't step in as a parent that had a little bit of connections to different people, my son would have been labeled as a troublemaker. My son, all because the teacher, didn't really know how to deal with the overcrowded class, and particularly, there's the elephant in the room is like Ms. Kayla said, is if there are not a lot of Black teachers, that is an issue with young people identifying with people like them. So I just wanted to say that.
So I would like to speak on the Annapolis High situation. So Annapolis, from obviously when we do talk about history, especially in AP, I'm solely usually the one African-American student in the class. Maybe there's like another one, but usually during especially slavery topics, yes, a lot of us get the stares, and I feel like we need African-American teachers in there because everyone stares and looks for you to say something about it before they say something, because they don't know what to say and what not to say. And curriculum wise, the only book I think, and they're thinking about taking it out, is To Kill a Mockingbird, that talks about racial injustice in the slightest. In my opinion, the school system kind of makes it seem like, oh, the civil rights era and slavery happened so long ago, like it's not really that imbalance. Like they spend a very brief time period on talking about that, and they more so talk about current politics or like Christopher Columbus and Manifest Destiny. That's what I feel like the school system mainly focuses on, but that's just my opinion based off of, I've been in the advanced classes, I've taken them, I felt the uncomfortableness with people looking on, do I say something? Am I allowed to say something? So I do think there should be more African-American topics related in history. As far as curriculum wise, most of the teachers work together to make sure they're all talking about the same thing. Once again, I go to Annapolis, not Broadneck. So usually, even if you're an IB, especially 9th and 10th, you're usually doing the same work as the rest of the English classes, but just at a higher level and just looking at it differently. So
Mr. J.A., thank you for your comments here. Typically, we have two other attendees here for the school system. Ms. Jolynn Davis, who's the Regional Assistant Superintendent for the Annapolis Cluster, and the Director of Information for the school system, Mr. Bob Mosier. I think both of them are on personal vacation time here in August, and neither of them could attend. But if you send to me a question, I'll combine them with other people's questions here, and I'll forward them on to the school system, and they can address your specific curricular question, which I don't think anybody here in the assembled meeting really is qualified to talk about official school policy.
Got you. And just to add on to what Kayla was saying, because just full disclosure, so my father is Nigerian, my mother's African-American. Her family's been in Anne Arundel County since the 1800s. But I'll say this is that one thing I would love to see is more history about African-Americans prior to coming to America. Because I think that is another thing where we fail the youth, is connecting them to the history of civilization, which starts in Africa. And I just think that when we start with slavery, we're missing at least 1,500 years of Black people's contributions to society. So,
And as I would like to remark is Annapolis High did try, Miss Richburg, love her. She did try to start a diversity program with the IB kids specifically because we don't have as many African Americans working in the IB program to focus on what they could. So Annapolis High is trying to figure out what they can do better to handle the teachings and how we feel in classes. So I do know Annapolis High is trying in that regard.
Okay,
Uh,
Jeff, I just want to say something.
Okay,
Mhm.
Enid, and then we rejoin Odessa. Enid,
Okay.
you're still muted.
I just wanted to say that unless things have changed the last 5 years since I retired, teacher curriculum is pretty given. In fact, that's one of the complaints that teachers started having. It's given so much. Your delivery may vary, but pretty much your curriculum is given to you. As far as books being approved, there is an approved list. If you want to teach from a book or video or movie that isn't approved by the board, there's a process you have to go through, which includes getting 5 or 6 people, including an administrator from your school, to read it, approve it, write a short synopsis, and then you have to send it for approval. So I don't know why someone was allowed to use any type of media source that wasn't approved.
yeah, I think because, and I'm saying this with a little bit of grace, but because it probably was in Broadneck and there were very few African Americans that she's probably taught, it probably didn't seem alarming to other people and, students. I mean, but they're students, they're children, so they probably don't even know, what is actually approved or not. And, if it's into what Kayla was saying, like if you're talking about slavery and they're only talking about slavery in America, then of course we're only talking about African people for the most part. But if we were talking about the history of slavery, then that would open up discussions where even Europeans would relate that they went through slavery at times. The Romans had slavery. There's slavery in the Bible. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But when we only talk about it like slavery, like Black people are slaves, and then we back it up with media to represent that, it doesn't allow people's minds to even accept the truth as it really is.
Alderwoman Rodby and Alderwoman Finlayson.
Thank you. I think we're probably on a topic where we could spend a couple hours just because there's so much here. So I'll just be really quick. It's occurred to me as a former social studies teacher at Annapolis High School who taught US government and world history that in terms of what's required for the social studies curriculum, there's only 3 classes. There's only 3 years of social studies required: US government, US history, and world history. And we are required to pack, as teachers, are required to pack so much material, and we're still leaving something out. So to me, that has begged the question, do we need to add more space in the curriculum? I know that, it's always difficult to talk about adding requirements, but, when we have, difficult conversations in society as a whole, and we don't have a shared common knowledge of history, and there's some enormous gaps. I mean, I think I didn't grow up here, so my history education was, somewhere else. But, we need to have a pretty deep understanding of history to understand, just how our society works. And I feel like we've smashed it into 3 years. And that maybe it's time to talk about adding additional social studies requirements because we can't cram everything we need to in 3 years.
Yep.
Alderwoman Finlayson.
Thank you. And what's in those 3 years is probably not always totally accurate. I suspect after the turmoil of this year, many textbooks are going to be reevaluated. Many curriculums are going to be reevaluated, as they should. And so I would hope that would be one of the questions we have for Ms. Davis and Mr. Mosier, which is, what is the school system doing to incorporate a more diverse educational experience into all of their courses? And we don't like to talk about it, but class size is an issue. We have far too many kids. You know, at one time there was an initiative to keep class sizes below 25. Actually, it was below 20 in grades K through 5 or 4, I think it was at one point, and the funding went away, and now class size is off the hook. There were times at South River when I had 40 kids in an English class. That was a different day and time. But you know, classes today are entirely too large, and we don't have the management skill set to handle it. So that speaks to a third issue, which is training. So I'm done. Thank you.
All right, let me see. Janet and Laura, very quickly, and then we'll circle back to Odessa's idea. You guys got the last word. Janet.
Okay, so this builds off Adetola's idea of, and he's our vice president of Annapolis High PTSA, so it's great to have him here. The issue I want to bring up with you in new business was representation. So at our June 22nd meeting, we asked who from the Annapolis cluster is on the 14, reimagining, reopening committees that are kind of restructuring how we're going to learn this year. We didn't get any answers. I got an email back from Dr. McMahon, and she said we invited people from many different organizations, the CAC, the Parent Advisory Commission, the Greater Glen Burnie Business Association, whatever. We don't know anyone who Annapolis cluster who was on there. I'm not aware of their names. I sent in a Public Information Act request on the 22nd of July. So hopefully in 30 days we'll find out. But our lack of representation, we did not have a CAC member for the majority of the past school year from the elementary level. So the structures of pseudo input that the school system is using to get that, input and advisement are not including our Annapolis community. And that's a problem that we need to fix.
Your point is well taken, Janet. And as we all know here, we're undergoing somewhat of a sea change with the change from an appointed school board to an elected school board here. And our elected official after November is going to be here from Annapolis with deep roots, either a candidate. And I would hope that would be an issue that our elected school board member would take to heart and push forward.
That our structures of advisement within AACPS are not inclusive of getting real input from the community.
Well, those are your words, but I think that an elected school board member is going to be responsive to the people who voted, in this case, her into office.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, who was the other person, Laura? Laura.
I think Janet covered a lot of what I wanted to say. I do think we've got two issues that were huge issues, and there is some overlap that we're talking about. We've got schools reopening and all of the issues that have to deal with that, and then we also have absolutely the need to address how we're handling diversity and failing in a lot of cases to handle diversity in our communities. I would love to see us split those into two different meetings so that we can give each subject really the full attention. I mean, they're both going to be ongoing issues as the school year goes on. And there's so much, we only have an hour and a half, or in this case, almost 2 hours to cover those things. So with what Jess just said earlier about devoting our September meeting, I think it makes sense to deal with how reopening is going. But could we do this in October? Could we have our own panel? Could we really tackle as best we can? I mean, we can't solve everything in one evening, but I love the ideas that the things that are being brought up here are very valid points that need to be addressed, and they need to be given the time and attention, that we can. And so I would love to see us devote an entire meeting, maybe our October meeting, and say, this is our, maybe invite some of our speakers from elsewhere in the, from the community, to have kind of a roundtable discussion, because I want to, you know, there are so many issues here at so many levels. So much of what Kayla has said at previous meetings, you know, I dwell on that stuff a lot, and try to figure out what it is that we can do differently. And it is something that needs a lot more than just a single line item on the budget or on the agenda, I think.
Okay, fair enough. So Odessa, are you still with us here? Let's circle back to you. And you had posed a question, and I think as we talk about what the next couple of months hold in terms of our meetings and where we go, this may include some of the concerns that you have and you continue to voice and have raised for a couple of years now. Are you still with us?
Yes, I am. I just want to say, I think there's a misconception about the difference between a charter school and a contract school. And I think we need to clarify that, because a lot of people thought Monarch in Parole was a charter school. And it's a big difference between a charter school and a contract school. So when I advocate the needs of males of color for a charter school, that would be addressed in identifying the curriculum would be set up to identify the needs of a certain population for a charter school. And our African American males are at the bottom of every list, or every survey or whatever you want to call it, at the bottom. So we need to address the inequities in the school system, and especially our African American males. I don't understand why we just can't deal with that. And so when you brought up the KIPP Academy, I was kind of glad to hear you bring it up, because that's what we need, another KIPP Academy or a charter school to close the opportunity gap or the achievement gap among our African American males and the population of the schools. So how can we set this up where we can continue this discussion about the charter school or KIPP Academy?
So Sheila.
I believe, Odessa, you were part of an application in the past for a charter school, were you not?
Yes, I was, but it was denied.
Okay, and I realized that. So maybe that's a starting point. Maybe we can look at the issues, the objections to that charter school application and try to address those issues, so that when it's time to reapply again, you will have filled in whatever was missing or whatever the focus may have been that should have been different, or whatever the case. But, you know, I know there have been other efforts to start a charter school. We know that the school system has not totally embraced the idea. You know, the state treats charters and contracts differently for a reason, and not to necessarily make it a valid reason, but that's their choice. So maybe we need to figure out what the issues are and address those issues so we can be successful the next time around.
Great ideas. Thank you.
After hearing like the issues with Monarch, with the situation with the bus routes and all this, all my mind can think about is, where are we going to put this? Annapolis is very small. Where else do we have to put this charter school? That runs into another problem, because then we would have to put it outside of our guidelines, and it would have to go into another cluster, because driving around now that you just look and there's no space to put another school. The high school's already out of, I think, city lines or something like that. So where are we going to put it?
That would be something, that's something that would be discussed and worked out.
Kayla, if I could jump in just for a second here. You know, one of the reasons why the school system about 5 or 6 years ago began a correspondence with Monarch Academy had to do with a gross and exceptional overcrowding in some of our elementary schools, right? And you know, it was tied in with the very rapid increase in population in our Hispanic population. And you know, we've known from watching the capital budget very quickly that to build a new school in Anne Arundel County, to get on that long list is probably a 20-year process. So I think that the school board, in conjunction with the administration, very smartly reached out to private industry and said, look, we've got this overcrowding issue. What can you do, not using existing buildings, but if we pay you a per capita fee, can you start a new school? And that conversation was concluded and a new school opened up within 36 months. That's an amazing time frame. And so that's the benefit of including the idea of going to a charter system or contracting out with private industry, where we don't have to go through the typical capital budget and try, the poor folks from Crofton begged and pleaded for 3 decades to get a high school. They're finally getting it.
And Old Mill's the same way. They were extremely overcrowded.
Absolutely.
And finally getting a new school for the high school.
So at this point, I wouldn't be discouraged by how long it takes for new school construction. If there's a real need, and if the city of Annapolis can make a compelling argument that, look, all of our charter systems so far have been aimed at the upper end of STEM and IB and the performing arts, but there's a whole other part of our student population that is being neglected and isn't getting specialized needs met. And we know that there are programs out there like KIP and there are a handful of others that have a proven track record of reaching these people and helping to raise performance levels for people who are slipping through the cracks. I wouldn't be dissuaded by the capital budget. Let's get consensus in the city and then use the power of the city and the power of our elected officials to do the right thing. Laura, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to add to this discussion is that it cycles back around to transportation issues, because if we say we want to open up a charter school somewhere, we've got to get kids there, and we've got to make sure that the kids who need to get there can get there. If they open up a charter school with consolidated bus stops, you're right back to where you are now, where the kids who need it can't get to it because they don't have a parent who can get up at 6:30 in the morning and drive them across town to the consolidated bus stop. I mean, here, for example, if you want to go down to South River, I live down the peninsula near Quiet Waters. There is one pickup for this whole area to go to the South River STEM program, and that's at the Eastport Library. If you don't have a parent who has a car who can get up and can drive you to that bus stop at 6:30 in the morning, you can't attend that program. So all this conversation about it comes back to, we're talking about the same thing, but we're coming back to access to the individual communities. We need to make sure that students are getting the services in the schools where they are. My concern is if we focus a lot of attention and effort on getting a new charter school opened up, what about the kids that are still here? What about the kids that don't go to the charter school? The kids at Annapolis Middle, the kids at Georgetown East? Opening up a single charter school solves a few of our problems, but it also leaves a whole lot of kids then where the resources, they're not getting the resources that they need. I'd almost rather advocate towards getting the students the resources they need in the schools that they currently attend, rather than spending a lot of time and energy advocating for an outside of our clusters charter school that may or may not be in the end accessible to the students that we need. And I also think we need to advocate for a transportation system that actually works, that gets the kids to the programs that they want to attend.
And
So,
provide
Odessa,
activity buses. I'm just going to throw that in there. Sorry, I interrupted, but that's so critical that kids can participate in extracurriculars. And if the transportation isn't there, that's a huge piece of their school experience they're missing. Yep. Sorry to jump in. I just had to.
Oh, I totally agree.
Yeah, no, Lisa, I mean, I'm glad you're here because the entire first part of this last school year, the attention of parents and guests in our meetings was devoted to transportation issues and the unsatisfactory way that the needs and concerns of parents are being met with our school transportation system. So you, as our elected leader, I know you know that, but I mean, I'm not sure we can emphasize enough how the transportation system has been failing the Annapolis cluster. So Odessa, I think on the table, if I understand the consensus, there seems to be movement here for spending our September meeting talking about the transition to our distance learning program for the fall semester. And then there might be an opportunity here in October to engage a longer strategic goal setting discussion about what the long-term education needs are. Is that, why don't I throw that open here? Does that sound like a workable plan here? So that's the discussion on the floor.
And yes, and maybe I can bring someone that was on that committee trying to get a charter school a few years back to come and speak at the next meeting or the meeting that you have designated for that.
Sure. Is there any opposition to doing that? So September's theme would be the, yeah, Sheila.
Well, I guess my question is, are we going to have the board representatives, Jolynn or Bob, come in and tell us, because school will be started by then. So what will be the purpose? Are we just going to listen to what we already know to be their plan because kids are already back, or to critique what they're doing the first week of school? What are we gonna do with that information? I would like it, this meeting, if we were gonna figure out what they were doing, would have been an ideal meeting. September seems a little late once school was started to talk about their transition into, virtual learning, which they've been doing. I think we could get a presentation from them on what they're doing and ask appropriate questions. So my question is that what the intent is, to ask questions or critique the program or, their plan? Or, because I was really hoping that we could use part of the first meeting as another sort of a town hall, because I'm hoping to present in September. We're starting our budget process in September, October. So I'm on that timeline. So
I just think
All right.
there's a lot
Jess
of
and then
issues
Janet.
on their radar.
I think that if we're going to do a town hall, I actually think it should be completely separate from our regular meeting, because we have a lot of things that we need to discuss and, and resolutions and movement that we have to do at a regular meeting. Just like during city council, you wouldn't do a town hall because it takes away from the business that you have to do. I think that we should have a town hall at a separate meeting, set up something different for a town hall. And I would hope that, since we weren't able to hear from Bob and Jolynn today, that by, the beginning of September, they'll be able to give us a truly, comprehensive discussion of where we are, what the concerns are, what the Education Commission can do to help, and how we can, fulfill our mission of providing the resources. And I think that's going to be, I would have loved to have had it now. I think Laura suggested in an email today that perhaps we could have something like that later in the month. In that case, that would be ideal. But I do think we really need to hear from them explaining what's happening and where the concerns are and what the plans are.
And give them the feedback.
I would like to clarify. I wasn't hoping that we would have a town hall. I wanted to give the commission an opportunity to weigh in on the question, which is, where do we go from here? Not one that we would open up. I wanted to hear from the commission. That's all.
Okay,
So if I'm understanding Sheila right, Sheila appears to me to say that our discussion of strategic goal setting ought to come earlier, say in September rather than in October. So there's a competing opinion here. Janet.
I would just say that because we have so few other opportunities, we have not been on the committees to try and plan this, that they really need our feedback from our residents as to how things are going for our school participants. So I think that is crucial for putting things on their radar. I had a city official come to me when I talked about the need to get 1,000 students in and out of Annapolis Middle School onto Forest Drive in a quick things. And he said to me, wow, that was never on my radar, you know, because we just need to keep putting our particular issues of our constituents on the 85,000 student system radar.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I'm not suggesting that we don't. I'm suggesting that the first week of September is probably doesn't give you an opportunity to see if anything is working, or, you know, to have any concerns that are based on any track record at all.
Well, hopefully.
Okay, I think I got it. I think both sides have been made here. Let's do a straw poll here. Just raise your hand. We got two choices here. We can do our strategic goal setting in September or strategic goal setting in October. Okay, is that clear? Okay, so if you want to do the strategic goal setting in October, right, October, and do September as a what's happening in distance education, then raise your hand right now.
October.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and if you want to do our strategic planning in September and give Alderwoman Finlayson more guidance to go up to the city of Annapolis earlier, then raise your hand now. I'm going to raise my hand for that. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, I raised my hand. I don't know how to do it. I raised my
Okay.
hand.
She's
Okay,
in
raise
the
your hand
dark.
again. Odessa, raise your hand. Okay, her hand is 1, 2, 3,
Okay.
4, 5. Is it
Jeff?
possible that we have a tie? Yeah.
Jeff, could I also just, I mean, could some of this be done via email? I mean, I would love to get, I feel like we don't really use email enough. You know, we have so many questions. We have a lot of issues. Why can't we start bringing some things up and kind of do more via email rather than having to wait? I mean, when you have to wait for a whole month and then we only have an hour and a half to get through everything, you know, we're just not going to get through everything.
Well, I get that, but you know what? We've got the open meetings law that we need to adhere to, and any substantive decision-making needs to be done in public.
Right, but I'm saying we could certainly give Alderwoman Finlayson some feedback via email. I mean, I think that's something we can all sort of, we all have ideas about. We could all certainly give her some feedback, so she has something before September.
I've got plenty for September, so not to worry.
Okay. All right, well.
Well, and also I think, you know, if we do that over email and then we have, you know, 10 or 15 minutes of the September meeting is devoted to that, and then we do our strategic goal planning, because I don't think that without knowing what's happening with e-learning and having a month into it, I don't know that we could make any plans in September. I mean, I think October is really going to be, because we won't have any idea. I mean, right now we have no idea what the fall is going to look like. And I mean, I wouldn't feel comfortable 3 days after school started making a decision about goals for this year.
When will our September meeting be? Here's the question. Are we meeting at the beginning of September, or are we meeting at the end of September?
That's next on the agenda. That's next on the agenda, Laura. Let's hold off on that. How about this, guys? How about if we ask Jolynn and Bob Mosier for an update at the beginning of the September meeting? We'll spend, say, maybe a half hour limited to that, no more. And then we'll begin the first of 2 months on strategic goal setting here. We'll devote the second half of that meeting to Sheila's feedback for her, and then we'll continue that in October. Does that sound? Give me a thumbs up if that looks like an acceptable compromise. Okay, I'm going to use the prerogative of the chair to say that motion passes. So we'll do that. Okay, thanks. And Odessa, thanks very much for your ideas there and submitting them. It's clear that you got a lot of passion for that. And there are very strong opinions, I think, on all sides of the charter school issue. So don't underestimate what a heavy lift that is if you want to go down that path.
Okay, well, thank you for your encouragement.
Yeah, well, hey, I like fighting the man, right? Or fighting the woman. And, you know, I clearly there's, looking at the data that we presented at Sheila's open house a couple of days ago, we're graduating an enormous proportion of people who don't have proficiency in math and English. And where are they going and what are they doing and can we do better? I personally think we can. I personally think we can do better. Okay.
Yes, we can.
So we got a couple of issues here on the agenda. We asked before for a corresponding secretary. to handle some of the correspondence with people outside the commission. I normally take it upon myself, the duty of chair, to correspond with our elected officials, with Bob Leib and with Lisa Rodvian, as she knows. But outside of that, honestly, I need some help, and I don't think really it's the prerogative of the chair to be engaging with a broader constituency. So I think it's probably time, given the desire of many members of the commission, to bring in a corresponding secretary. I had one volunteer, Pam Bukowski, and are there any other volunteers who are interested? Laura Booth, any other volunteers?
Okay,
If Pam wants to do it, I won't arm wrestle.
Okay, so I'm sorry, is that Pam right there? You dropped off my scope here.
I'm still on.
Pam's
I
not
don't see
on.
Pam, no? Okay, well, Pam was problematic in the sense that she's no longer officially on the commission, so we need to figure out how to get her on as a non-sworn member. I think priority ought to go to a sworn member. So Laura, if you're interested, and if there are no other nominations, let's go to a voice acclamation vote unless there's any discussion. All those in favor, raise your hand of appointing Laura as the corresponding secretary. Any opposed? Okay, so Brianna, if you would make sure that the notes reflect that. And then Laura, my guidance to you is that any correspondence that goes outside of simply going to Mr. Leib or to Ms. Rodvian, it ought to reflect the will of what the commission had already talked about and voted on in public. And if it is not, then we need to wait probably until the next time. Any policy decisions need to go before an open meeting. But any implementation of things that we've already decided that go outside those two chains there, that we'd ask you to take the lead on that. Okay, any other conversation on that?
Oops, I was gonna say the measure that we voted on tonight for regarding the transportation department, we want that to go to all the members of the Board of Ed and Dr. Arlotto's office. Anyone else or anybody
Well,
else?
here's a perfect example. This is probably the first thing that
My first order of
corresponding
business.
secretary can take on. Yeah.
So
Okay.
anybody besides the Board of Ed and Dr. Arlotto? I mean, I don't know. Is there anyone else that should be copied on that?
Yep, I was to say maybe copy the council just because they've been involved.
Okay.
I don't know, just a suggestion.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I would definitely
Okay.
include the council since they're the ones who confirmed the funding.
Okay, Laura, thanks very much. And just for your edification, I think we know that within a couple of days of our meetings, we have draft minutes that Brianna posts on the AEC Google Drive, and she's very, very good at getting those out in a prompt manner. So you can
Thank
draw
you,
upon
Brianna.
that. Yeah. Okay. Next, and the last thing I've got on my list is Janet Norman, representation of the cluster. Is there anything new that you want to add that we haven't already talked to, Janet?
I just wanted to add that the functionality of CAC and stuff, we have not had a functional CAC representation, much. Kara McCandless has tried to do the secondary level, but they have not strived to do much at the secondary level. They focused on recess policy and stuff. So the structures that board is using to get the input are not serving us. That was the representation that I was referring to, that hopefully we can alter.
Yeah, I mean, you're coming through loud and clear.
That's all I want to say.
Any other thoughts or comments on that idea?
Just so we make sure we include the PIAC as well. It's both of those organizations.
Right. Who's the PIAC person for Annapolis?
It was Shannon Sprague, and she stepped down in May. And there's new one has not. Right, a new PIAC has not been appointed. And I did speak to the I did hear through a friend. I had a friend connect me with the CAC rep for the elementary school, and she was not invited to be in any of the cluster in any of the fall 2020 discussions.
14 committee, yeah. So Jeff, maybe we could reach out and try and connect whoever is appointed to these CACs and stuff. We're not having feedback from them to our meetings and to our PTAs and stuff. That's the disconnect, perhaps, that's happening.
Yeah, no, I understand where the disconnect is. I mean, this group of the AEC is historically where people engaged in local schools have spent their attention. So, you know, I'm hoping with our new elected school board member that we're going to see a much closer relationship between you know, our members of the board and the AEC. All right.
If those structures are state mandated, by the rules of the state to have a CAC, you know, we need to somehow link them in to this community of people.
Yeah, what would you recommend, Janet?
Maybe we could have some input as to who's appointed to the CAC and make sure they have a little bit of experience and, you know, an interest or whatever. I don't know. I don't know how the school board is choosing people. I don't know if, and when there's a vacancy, like we never, the CAC person resigned in October, and none of us heard about it until like May, you know, when the new person was appointed or something. So it's not being advertised that, oh, you're not being represented. By the way, there's nobody in those positions to speak up for you.
The group that looked at this during the transition team, during Gavin's transition, actually recommended that the membership of our commission be expanded to include the PIAC and CAC reps so that there was immediate connection. That was made up so that our commission included them officially so that we would know who they are and they would be a part of our discussions and a part of our you know, governing body. So that's just something to consider.
I think it would change a code requirement or require a code change to change the makeup of the commission.
Yes, that's what was recommended. It was recommended that we have a change of city code to add the 2 representatives from the CAC and the 2 representatives from the PIAC to the membership of the Education Commission to create a permanent linkage between those organizations and ours for better support and advocacy.
Well, I mean, my own personal feeling is that our effectiveness at the AEC isn't in code. Our effectiveness is in the interpersonal relationships that we're able to build. The strength of those interpersonal relationships and our ability to influence are going to determine how successful we are. So the ability that we think that we need to be closer with the PIAC rep and the CAC rep, please do reach out to them, invite them. We have our regular meeting set, and let's see if we can develop stronger bridges and stronger bonds. So as I look at my agenda further, I think that the very last thing we've got is the new meeting day. Janet, you and Brianna were looking at potentially identifying a new day for us to meet on a regular basis. Next month is a good time to test it out, since the first Monday of the month is Labor Day. So what have you all been able to find?
Well, I don't know what Brianna's found, but in talking with Hillary just briefly today, there is a kind of bandwidth bottleneck because they have to run these meetings through Zoom, through the boards and commissions website hosting, that she only has so many slots and to move things around. And so I looked at the Board of Ed meeting schedule, the City Council, County Council. I was hoping that maybe we could switch to a Wednesday that did not conflict, Wednesday at 7 p.m. that didn't conflict with City Council and County Council things, but she had one slot there for the Alcohol Board and Commission. So I'm going to have to follow up with her to see if that is possible. I think she had 2 channels that she could use.
Well, Wednesdays are school board meetings too, right? So.
Well,
I
so
mean,
the first Wednesday of the month is school board in the morning. And if we could be that school board, if we could be that meeting in the evening, then we would have things coming fresh off the school board to discuss. That would be a possibility of the first Wednesday of the month evening, 7 p.m. Because the third Wednesday of the month is school board evening. And Sunday is Annapolis High PTSA.
Okay, so we'll wait for further guidance from you and Brianna in future months as to what the recommendation is. We do have an issue for September, and I think my recommendation is to go with the second Monday of the month. September is a horrible day. There's no day that we're going to avoid PTA, Zoom calls and stuff, but I think we're just going to have to run with it and go. So
And
any
in
other
September,
thoughts?
we're going to run into all the back to school nights. So I think we need to be
Yeah.
careful about scheduling opposite any of them.
Well, we aren't going to be able to deconflict that, Laura. We're just going to have to pick a
Right.
day and run with it. So if we.
City Council, Sheila.
Jeff, there's a public safety meeting at 4 and a regular city council meeting at 7 on the 14th.
Okay. Okay. Well, any other suggestions here from the
Well,
from the
I-
It
floor?
seemed like the third Wednesday was
That
not
Wednesday.
a conflict. Or sorry, the third Monday. In general,
well,
if we
I
were
was
to
gonna
choose that
suggest-
day going forward.
That's what I
That's
was
not a
Third Monday.
county
saying.
council?
Isn't that
Yeah.
county council?
County council is first and third.
Yeah, and I want to make sure that our, commissioners can attend county council and city council.
Yeah.
There was a suggestion to move the time so that since these meetings are going to be virtual for a while, so that our meeting could be concluded before the county council meeting started. But
I
that was just
can't
thrown out there.
do, I know we had talked about 5 o'clock. I can't do 5 o'clock. My job and my husband's job don't allow,
Or 5:30 to 7,
I mean, even 5:30
just as
is hard. 6
an
is
option.
Yeah, that's the dinner hour.
just a really
The
good-
first Monday of the month is public safety from 4 until 5:30.
Janet, can you maybe talk to Hillary and see about that Wednesday, the first Wednesday in September, and see if she's
Yes.
able to do that? And then we can discuss, if that's available, then we could do that and then discuss it for going forward, what the best thing is.
Yeah, and I'll try and write up a little matrix so you can visually see all the conflicting days and times with
And
Hillary.
The
we'll need
first
to run all
Wednesday
of these by Jolyn and Bob too.
I'm looking at the calendar. The first Wednesday of the month is the Alcohol Beverage Control Board
Right,
and the
that's what-
Environmental Commission. So there's 2 meetings back to back then.
Okay.
All right. At 7. So if you
Are
want to
are those
start at 5 to
sequential?
7.
Are those at the same time, Sheila? Or
Yes, but probably 2 different locations.
She said she had 2 channels for them to be able to run.
And there are 2.
Okay. And they're
Yeah.
both 7 to
And
8:30?
they're both at 7 to 10. Alcoholic Beverage Board is 7 to 10. The other is 7 to 9. So you could go earlier, 5 to 7 or 5 to 6:30.
Okay.
Second
Well-
Wednesday of the month is the Housing Community Development. They start at 6:30.
Okay.
Could go earlier.
Okay.
But,
um,
And what did we say was being held on the second Monday of each month? Anything?
City
I thought you-
Council
I
Just
thought-
for September, right?
of every month, 2nd and 4th is the City Council.
Right.
Okay, so I thought somebody just said, when I said something about the third Monday.
That's county.
County council.
Oh, county.
Right.
Okay.
So that's why I was trying to gravitate to like a Wednesday and see if we could grab a Wednesday that didn't conflict with Board of Ed. So maybe I'll follow up with Hillary and see if there's bandwidth capacity to include us virtually.
Okay,
Julie?
so Janet, you and Brianna, if you would, over the longer term, identify some issues, some possible dates for us to vote on next time. We still got the issue of when to meet in September. Sheila, how about Thursday, the 10th?
Economic Matters at 4, Annapolis Conservancy Board at 5:30, Transportation at 6.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's just one day after school opens. So it'd be great if we had, you know, a week and a half or so to just see how the kinks are working.
So that puts us into the following week, September, Monday, the 14th. We already talked about that. That's a no-go.
What about Wednesday,
Maritime Advisor, Wednesday, Board of Appeals at 7 o'clock, Environmental Matters at 3 o'clock, so 3 and 7.
Okay,
Okay, so
well,
it
there
might
may
be a
be a
7
second
o'clock.
channel open then on Wednesday, the 16th.
Yeah, I'll ask
Okay.
her.
Okay, so that appears to me to be the best time from what we've seen so far. How about a show of hands? That will be Wednesday, the 16th from 6, starting at 6 o'clock. Okay, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, we'll call that. Oh, Odessa, I got you there. So let's make that then Wednesday, September 16th at 6 p.m. And we'll spend the first half hour or so. I'll ask Bob and Jolynn for an update on what's going on. We'll spend the rest of that meeting talking about introducing the concept of strategic planning, what the long range goals are for where we go from here. And we'll continue that conversation into October. Okay. You know how I feel on ending meetings early, and we're an hour late, and this is killing me.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you,
Jeff.
Yeah, well.
A lot of good stuff done.
There is a lot of good stuff. And you know what, the timing of this is coming at a
Yeah.
nationally, I think, at a time where we need to work through some of these things. And I think societally, people are looking more and more at the education system, and they're seeing, when they peel away the onion and look underneath the rocks, just what inequities there are. And, you know, I think if the Education Commission does its homework, we can help provide some possible solutions for decision makers and give them some informed selections, as well as maybe some trade-offs. And, you know, I'd like to see the group go in that direction here over the next few weeks. Okay, that's all that's on my agenda here.
Do we need to approve our minutes while we have a quorum?
Oh, that's right. We do have a quorum here. We distributed the minutes from the past 2 meetings electronically. Let's go with the first meeting. The first meeting was, I don't even know what month it is right now. Tonight is August.
There's a May
July,
minutes.
and May. Okay, let's go with the May minutes. Are there any changes, deletions, corrections for the May 2020 minutes? Okay, let's show hands for those who vote to approve. Okay, let the record reflect that that's unanimous. And we go next to, we didn't meet in June due to the late May meeting. July's minutes.
No, they're June minutes.
Okay, June minutes. We didn't meet
June
in
22nd, the minutes of June
Okay.
22nd.
So June minutes were distributed electronically. Any additions, corrections, deletions? Okay, we'll take that as no. All those in favor of approving them as published, raise your hand, please. Okay, and let the record note that that was a unanimous decision to approve the minutes. Okay, anything else on the agenda that we've forgotten? Any other new business? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Okay, second. All those in favor, raise your hand, please. Any opposed? Okay, thanks very much, guys. This is a very, I think, a formative and productive meeting tonight, and we look forward to continuing our conversation then. What day do we say? Wednesday, the what?
Wednesday, the 16th at 6
Wednesday,
p.m.
the 16th of September.
Okay.
At 6
6
p.m.
p.m.
Okay, that's all I've got. This concludes the August 2020 Annapolis Education meeting. We'll stop recording here.